What's up, night timers? Good to see you all on this Saturday night. It's a rainy, dreary Saturday night here in beautiful southern Indiana for me, but hope everything's going well where you guys are at. Here on this, well, we're about a little over a week away from Christmas, so it's coming. We're getting there. I did a little Christmas shopping today, and that's always a blast. I can understand why people. Yeah, I mentioned this on the stream a few weeks ago. Talking about the way that we as a society has changed our consumer habits, and how maybe Dawn of the Dead may not be as relevant 15, 20 years from now as it was, in our time. Uh, us growing up. But I can understand it. Goddamn, like trying to maneuver around the mall these days in at this time of year. I mean, I can understand why people just throw their hands up and say, "Fuck it, I'm just going to order everything off Amazon and have it sent to me and not worry about it." Um, yeah, it was a shitload of people. I went there, went to Barnes and Noble as well, and both, and then that's good, I guess, um, for regular storefronts. Um, that people are actually still coming, but yeah. But anyway, hope you guys had a good weekend so far. Um, I'm going to be doing the part two of the Romero death scene ranking tonight. Looking at the 80s, all of Romero's films from 1980 all the way through 1989. And it's weird to think in the 80s that Romero really, in terms of directing, only did 4 films in the 80s: Knightriders, Creep Show, Day of the Dead, Monkey Shines. It's interesting to think about because I guess a lot of people associate a lot of Romero's work with the 80s. So it's interesting that, and I guess it's just because he had I mean, such great stuff. I mean, maybe Monkey Shines. Depending on how you feel about Monkey Shines, I know people that love Monkey Shines. I know it's people that just don't really care for it. I fall into that category of people that just don't really care for that film. I went back and rewatched it um, a couple nights ago, and I don't know. There's just something about it. It's George's first attempt at being a kind of a director for hire, just kind of a project that he got offered and just and took. It's the first time that George really did that. I think George was just trying to prove something to himself. And we talked about last week Richard Rubenstein and George's relationship and Laurel and how that all kind of fell apart. And Richard took Laurel public and wanted to kind of focus more on television um, and doing other people's films, and George was not really interested in doing that. George kind of wanted to just be a filmmaker. George just wanted to make movies. Um, so once Day of the Dead kind of fell flat when it came out, they kind of split their own ways, and George kind of went in the direction of, I'm going to try to work within the system a little bit and kind of work with the studios a little bit. And I think that was a mistake, in my opinion. I think George had some really interesting, especially a lot of the the screenplays that he was writing around that time. 'Cause God, Monkey Shines, Monkey Shines was not his idea. It was his screenplay. The screenplay was adapted from another novel. Um, so it really wasn't George's idea. Neither was, The Dark Half. That's obviously a Stephen King story. Two Evil Eyes. That's a Edgar Allan Poe story. So Romero, Day of the Dead was kind of the last time that Romero actually made to me at least, a Romero film until Bruiser and 99, 2000, whenever that came out. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a well-made film. I mean, it's well acted. I mean, it's not bad. It's not one of those movies that you can watch and say, "Oh, this is just kind of fell flat. This didn't work." 'Cause, I mean, it really works really well. I mean, especially with George working with a monkey, and that's kind of the first time George really worked with animals like that. Um, it's a well-made film. It's an enjoyable enough film. It just doesn't feel like George to me for a number of reasons. Um, but outside of Monkey Shines, I mean, George, did Day of the Dead, Creep Show, two iconic horror films, especially of the 80s, and Knightriders, which to some people, I mean, this is, of course, Dawn of the Dead is my favorite George's films, of any film period. I mean, I'm pretty much, I'm sure most people probably understand that at this point if you've been watching this and following this channel. But in terms of George's best film, I mean, there's an argument to be made that maybe it is Knightriders. Because Knightriders, I mean, just the performances, the dialogue, the stunt work. I mean, there's so much about it, and really, it's one of the only. Trying to think. I'd say it's probably one of the only like Romero films that really kind of, you know, for me personally, gets me in my feelings or whatever. At the end of the film, I mean, when you see Tom Savini cry, when you're a teenager and you all you know Savini from is being the badass special effects and stunt guy that worked with Romero for years, and the first time you see Knightriders and you see Tom Savini break down and cry at the end of the movie, I mean, shit, that's powerful stuff to a horror nerd like me. I mean, you've never seen it before. You don't expect, you don't even expect Tom to even have that in him as an actor to where he can just cry like that. And B, it's Tom Savini. I mean, it'd be kind of like watching a movie and seeing like Bruce Campbell break down and cry or something. You know what I mean? Like you think of him as this horror guy who's like has this kind of typecast as this badass, guy. But yeah, that would be weird. I don't know. Has he ever done that in a movie? Anybody know? I'm not, I'm not the end all be all of Bruce Campbell's filmography or anything, but I don't know if he's really had too many, scenes like that in a movie. Um, so yeah, I mean, just getting back to it, I mean, it's going to be interesting to try to rank these because this is really the period. I mean, part one was one thing because George was not working with Tom Savini for most of that first decade. I mean, from Night of the Living Dead through the Crazies, it was, the effects and whatnot were, minimal and, at what they could do with the budgets that they had. And then even in Martin and Dawn, even, you know, uh, yeah, in Martin and Don, you did have Tom Savini, but you didn't have George wouldn't have the budgets then and the ability to give Tom and Tom didn't have the experience either, but you know, George didn't have the ability to give Tom, okay, here's a good chunk of change. Can you make me a can you make me a monster? Can you make me a crate monster? And Tom says, yeah, I can do that. Or can you, come up with all these insane ways to kill the zombies and like he does in Day of the Dead, he does what he does in Dawn of the Dead, but I think we can all agree that Day of the Dead is a completely different level for Tom Savini in terms of his effects work. So yeah, the first decade of Romero's career, I mean, it's hard to really gauge the death scenes just on like, oh, how the way that a lot of people do, especially looking at the stuff in the '80s, was like how gory was it or how well done was it? Like we were talking about last week, Tom Savini's magic tricks. I mean, the '80s is when we started getting Tom's best magic tricks. So it's going to be interesting to see how we're going to rank these because there's obviously probably a case to be made that all of these could probably, maybe there's a one or two that, there's a couple in Monkey Shines that it's like, yeah, but I will say there is one in Monkey Shines that I love, and it's probably my favorite thing of the entire movie. And I'm gonna have to really think it through and debate whether or not whether or not I want to put it up in there in that iconic territory or if it's just a personal and oddly because the categories, I mean, iconic, a satisfying way to die, oddly enjoyable, which is a fun one. I don't know. That was an oddly enjoyable death, and then deserve better, which is uh, did the character deserve better? Did they deserve an even more gruesome death, or did that character deserve something more than what they got? You can kind of interpret that in a number of ways, but I do have a couple of things to touch on here before we get into the actual rankings and the actual working on this tier list. Um, First and foremost, I saw yesterday, I saw the news that in February there's going to be another Creepshow 4K release from Scream Factory. Although they say it's Shout Factory, but it's a Walmart exclusive steelbook of the 4K for Creepshow. Um, The artwork on this sucker looks fantastic. It's beautiful. It looks amazing. Um, if you're one of those if you're one of those people that just buys Blu-rays and 4Ks just to have the artwork in the collection and just to have the slipcase and steelbook or whatever the hell people that collect physical media you know collect shit differently. Some people collect it for the film, some people collect them for the artwork or just to say that you get those people that are just really, really into collecting things hardcore to the point where they have to have every single version of anything that anybody puts out, and I think that's just crazy. But when it comes to Romero, that's kind of how I am. Like I'm not like that for most. Like usually, like I'll kind of gauge it if on the quality of the film. Like it's like yes, Flesh Eater has a 4K, but do we really give a shit to pay the $40 or whatever it is to pick that up to watch Flesh Eater in 4K? I don't. Like, I mean, the DVD is fine for something like that. Um, a lot of those, Romero adjacent, um, and you can even make the case that there are a couple of Romero films that pretty much look fine on DVD. I mean, I've heard people say that Martin, just because it was shot on 16 millimeter and um, really didn't benefit from the 4K restoration as much as a lot of films do. I have heard people say that they're fine with the DVD, and that's totally understandable because the DVD itself looks pretty good. But there are some I've mentioned before, like Season of the Witch, and there's always Vanilla and the Crazies, and some of the real low budget Romero films that really never had a great release beforehand. Um, those are probably fine and on DVD or whatever. Um, but when it comes to this Creep Show 4K Steelbook, will I buy it? I hate to say it, but probably. I mean, if it's on sale, I think I saw it on pre-order on Walmart already. It's for $40. I'm not. There's no. I can't. I can't justify dropping $40 on yet another, because goddamn, we just now got the quote unquote special edition 4K release of Creepshow not even a year ago. I remember talking about it, when I first started doing these streams. Not even a year ago, we got the actual 4K release from Screen Factory because I that was one. Even then, I was just like, "Dad, do I really want to get this?" But I mean, it's Creepshow. It definitely did when I finally saw the transfer of it. Um, it did really benefit from that 4K restoration because it looked amazing. Screen Factory did do a very good job on it, but at the same time, I thought their Blu-ray release that they had a few years ago looked really really good too, with the little box cover and all that. So this I don't know, maybe like if it's like I said, if it come across it on sale. I mean, like, usually these Walmart steelbooks they do kind of sell out and disappear. So you never know. But I mean, the artwork, it does look beautiful. And if I knew this was coming out, I probably would have rather had this than the other 4K release that they just put out, less than a year ago. Because I do like the artwork on this. It does look really good. Let me see if I can share this so you guys can kind of see the artwork if you haven't seen it. And I mean, if you don't have Creepshow um, on 4K or Blu-ray. If you didn't get that original Creep Show release that Scream Factory did, you could probably pick this one up. I think this would probably be, like I said, I do like the artwork better. It is a steel book too, so if that's a selling point, I'm not crazy about steel books. I don't get too deep into the weeds on stuff like that, to be honest with you. Um, Let me see if I can share. I can show you guys what this sucker looks like instead of just talking about it. Let me see. Are we up? Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean the artwork, I mean it looks really, really good. Um, the two disc set, it's got a 4K and a Blu-ray with it. Um, so that's good. I do appreciate that. Um, when a company releases something on 4K and includes the Blu-ray with it, I do appreciate that aspect of it. Like I said, I'll probably get it at some point. I'm not gonna rush, but then again, it's like Walmart, they may just sell out of it. And it's funny, Walmart's coming out with all these different releases. I just picked up um which I don't think they were Walmart exclusives, but or maybe they were. Fuck, I don't know. I got Carrie and Fright Night on Steelbook 4K from Walmart the other day. Really, Walmart's really one of the only places left. I mean, Best Buy is kind of closing shop at this point. Um, so Walmart's really going to be one of the only places left. Target rarely has anything worth a shit. So Walmart's pretty much the last bastion of physical media retail right now. Um, but yeah, release date on this sucker February 26, 2024, so in about 2 months. So we'll see. We'll see what it's but then again, I mean, what me like I've you'll see in a second, like I collect anything Romero. I have to have at least one copy of any kind of release that comes out of it. Just I don't know why. I mean, I was talking about collecting a minute ago and kind of shitting on certain types of collectors. Well, I'm that way with Romero, but everything else, like maybe Texas Chainsaw or something like that, I'll have multiple copies of. But you know, so yeah, be on the lookout for that. I thought that was interesting news because, like I said, they just released that 4K from Scream Factory not even a year ago. So I kind of feel stupid picking that up, and I could have just got this Steelbook release from Walmart. But it is what it is. But this is a perfect opportunity if you don't have it, because I know a lot of people probably didn't pick up that 4K from Scream Factory. So this would probably be a good opportunity to do that if that's something that interests you. But speaking of collecting and picking up shit and buying things off the internet, I got something. Got a package in the mail the other day. Package, if you want to call this a package, shipped to me from the UK. It's something I found on eBay and picked up just because here lately I'm not. I haven't been really in the mood of or in the just the purchasing mode. I just have too much shit. I mean, that's why I did the auction a few months ago, just to kind of make room and get rid of some of this shit because I just have too much. I got to a point where I was just like, man, I keep buying and buying and buying, and now I have a bunch of shit that I can't display. And I'm one of those people that if you can't display something that you have, why have it? Like, I mean, I understand some things are worth money and you may want to hang on to it in case you get into a pinch one day, but when it comes to like artwork and stuff like that, I mean, if it can't fit on my wall, it kind of sucks having it because it's just like I have a number of one sheets and posters just kind of rolled up sitting in the corner right now, and it sucks. Um, because that's the whole reason I buy this stuff. I mean, that's you know, you surround yourself with stuff you like and stuff you like to look at, and I feel comfortable when I'm in my room and surrounded by all my crazy dark shit. But my daughter loves being in here too, and she's 3, and none of this shit bothers her. She loves this room. Um, but anyway, I'm gonna open this up. We're gonna take a look what's inside. I got it earlier this week, and I've been dying to open it up and actually take a peek at it, um, and see what I really have here. Um, but I thought I'd wait and do it on this stream because hey, what the hell? If you have a George A. Romero, and this is Romero related. If you have a George Romero stream or a George Romero channel, in my case, um, I feel like if you're watching this, you might find this pretty interesting too. So now comes the hard part of figuring out how to open this fucker. And it was something. It wasn't too expensive either. That's another thing. I'm not blowing a lot of money on things. So I found it for a good price, and I was like, that's interesting. And I'm kind of a sucker for certain things and certain items, and stuff like this is definitely stuff that I'm interested in. God damn, how do you open this thing? I don't want to just rip into it because of what's inside. So I'm trying to be as gentle as I can, but shit. I guess these envelopes in the UK are a little more resilient than ours here in the States. Oof. But yeah, we'll take a look at this. Then I want to kind of just do a little show and tell of some other stuff, and then we'll get into the rankings. God almighty, can we open this thing up? We may not even look at this thing. I may not be able to get this fucker open. Jesus. Oh, okay. Okay. That makes sense. So it's not an actual envelope. The dude just kind of covered it up and taped it. So that's interesting. Bear with me, folks. Oh, we got other shit in here. What's this? Random cardboard. So I will say the packaging's not the best on this. So I'm kind of a little skeptical here. What we got? All right. I do like this. This is really, really cool. Interesting. I don't know what any of this stuff means on the back here. Looks like it was taped to something. Let's see. But this looks like an original promotional photo for the Crazies. And this is one that I really haven't seen a whole lot of. And the thing, as you can see, it's got the soldiers and the fire. This is when they're burning that person, that dead person alive. Dead person alive. That dead person setting that motherfucker on fire. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, trying to just get a good shot at this so you guys can really get in there and look at it. But yeah, I don't know how rare this is or how, but it looks like I don't know what this would have been used for. On the back here, it's got some writing, some numbers, 36%, 17-160, 2x5. What does that say? Tuesday PB. No clue. That makes no sense to me. That means nothing to me. But the thing that really drew my attention to this photo is this soldier standing right here. If you look at that and you look at the poster for the Crazies, that is the image that they used pretty much all over the world for the posters and the one sheets for the Crazies when it came out. I mean, this is an iconic image. It's just this. Let's see, you can kind of, if you just kind of focus on that, this is the poster guy. So that image is taken from this photo, and I think that's pretty cool, and that's what kind of drew my attention to it. That's what drew me to it, and pretty cool. It's not, it's an okay shape. It's not in the best shape, but I was pretty stoked to find this. I was like, you don't see this around every day, so picked it up, and so yeah, pretty cool. And this is actually, I have a few other. I'll set this to the side here. I have a few other Crazies promotional photos. Now these are from the US. I know these are kind of lobby cards, or they're not really lobby cards, but they were kind of used as like front of house promotional material back in the day. But always like this one, the shot of the woman being drug away from the church by the soldiers there. And then pretty cool photo here of Lloyd Holler down there in Lloyd Holler. That may not be how you pronounce his name. Anybody that really knows, let me know. I don't know if it's Lloyd Holler or Lloyd Holler or Lloyd Holaire. Who knows? But yeah, I just thought this was a pretty cool shot too. So I picked those up a few years back. Saw those, and you don't really see a whole lot of Crazies promotional material. You see a lot, you see some one sheets, and you see some some things here and there, but in terms of just like lobby cards and stuff like that, they're pretty hard to find. So yeah, pick those up. And just while we're on the topic of the Crazies, I did mention, hang on, So I did mention this Blu-ray release that Arrow did quite a few years back. It is part of that Between Night and Dawn collection that's out there, and I remember somebody um, mentioning that they'd wish they'd pick that up. Well, you can actually if you can actually purchase all of the films that were in that box set individually. You can purchase this individually. I know that right now Arrow's having a sale on their website, arrowvideo.com, I believe. And I think you can pick up Season of the Witch is Always Vanilla and The Crazies, these exact Blu-rays. I think they're like $17 a piece or something right now. So they're on sale. Um, so you can pick up all three for, you know, 55, $60 or something like that, which is not bad because the actual box set. So basically for the box set, you're paying for a book and the big hard shell case on the outside, and you'd be paying 125 $130 for that right now. So if you're just interested in picking up the actual Blu-ray and checking it out and getting probably the best looking transfer of the Crazies that there's been to this point, even though the Blue Underground transfer is really good and it didn't do a bad job at all, but I mean this is pretty much the definitive way to watch the Crazies right now is on this Arrow Blu-ray. um so yeah, that's on sale right now on Arrow if you want to pick that up. But also pulled this off the shelf because we mentioned it and we were talking about the Crazies. This Vista VHS release. This is actually this hard shell. This is exactly what the case looked like from the video store where I first rented the Crazies, and so that's why I bought this off of eBay for way more than most people would probably ever pay for a VHS tape at this point. Um, but I just love it. It's nostalgia. It brings back memories. And then the Blue Underground DVD that came out. I mean, this is the version that I've watched the most. Probably I used to watch this. I've put this in and watched this exact DVD multiple times over the years. And this one's actually got the audio commentary with Bill Lustig and George Romero on it. I don't think that the Arrow version does. It has a commentary with it's like a fan commentary with a guy named Travis Crawford, who for some fucking reason has crowbarred his way into every Romero release that there's been. I mean, I think he's done commentary for all kinds of stuff, and God bless him. I heard that he's passed away. Um, it's nothing personal against him, but uh, I've tried listening to him to these commentaries, and it's just like I get nothing out of it. It's just it'd be the same thing as if I was doing the audio commentaries. It's like I'm just repeating shit that stories and articles that are out there to be found. It's not the same as if George and Tom were sitting down and just kind of shooting the shit and reminiscing about a film as they're watching it. That's the stuff that I like, and that's what you get with the Bill Lustig and George Romero commentary on this Blue Underground release. Um, and I don't think you get that on this. I don't see it on here, so I don't think it is included on this. There is some pretty cool stuff on here, in terms of special features that the Blue Underground one doesn't. It does have Romero was here locating the Crazies, which is like a location video with uh, friend of the channel and Romero historian Lawrence DeVincent, who actually just put up a video the other day of Lori Cardille and some early commercial work in Pittsburgh. If you go to his channel, it's a WGON TV channel. I think if you type in just WGON TV, it should pop up. But I had never seen any of these before, and it's fascinating. The one thought that came to my mind while I was watching that video of Lori Cardille doing these commercials is that Lori Cardille was like the real life Lynn, and There's Always Vanilla, where Lynn was talking about all the goofy ass commercials that she was, you know, uh, trying to get roles in and trying to participate in, and that was Lori Cardille's life at one point. So that's just here and there. But there are some other cool stuff um, on this Blu-ray. So I mean, this is the best way to look at. This is the best way to watch it. This is the one I've watched the most and has the awesome audio commentary with Bill Lustig and George Romero, which I do have. It's on my channel if you want to listen to it. But if you actually want to watch the film, because I tried putting the film to the actual commentary, and YouTube was just not fucking having it. Even though you can go and watch the Crazies in full on YouTube for free, I don't fucking get it. And then this is the original version that I first saw the Crazies. So I don't know. Getting that photo, I was just kind of like, oh man, this is a good time to talk about the Crazies a little bit and look at some of the collections and shit that I have on the Crazies. And because, we're coming up, I mean, December's almost over. 2023 is almost over. It's flown by. It's gone by so fast. And this is the last month that we can celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Crazies. The Crazies came out in 1973, 50 years ago. And, I just want to give it some love this year before we bounce, because there's a whole other slew of things coming up next year. So yeah, let's celebrate and love the Crazies while we can, because December's almost over. And next week on the stream, um, I'm gonna be doing kind of like a holiday Christmas themed stream, so I'll be able to talk about the Crazies then. But we will be talking. Hopefully, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, I'm going to be watching Santa Claus next week and having a little eggnog. I've never had eggnog before. I've heard people talk about eggnog. Um, I've never had it. I've never really had the urge to have it. It just sounds fucking gross. But I figure, hey, well, if I'm going to do a Santa Claus, John Russo Santa Claus. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a watch along on that. I'm going to have to get drunk. I'm going to have to drink. I'm having a few beers tonight. Yeah, some Guinnesses, but that's not going to affect me whatsoever. But eggnog, yeah, I hear if you drink enough of that, you get a little goofy. So yeah, that's the plan for next week, kind of a Christmas special. And then after that, I mean, I don't think I'll probably skip a week or something like that. But I do have an interview with somebody pretty cool that I'm gonna put up on the channel. A nice little extra that a lot of people in the United States probably haven't seen, and I think they should. So I will have that coming soon. But anyway, let me it's a quiet night tonight in the chat. I think everybody's just kind of streamed out. I've been watching streams all day. I know Dirk had a stream earlier where they're talking about New York Ripper and Pieces, Fulci's New York Ripper. It's been a while since I've seen that, but I remember watching it and thinking like, oh, this is actually one of Fulci's better movies that I've seen. I really enjoyed that film. And then Silent Night, Deadly Night, watch along stream with Dana and Jay over on Dana Evil Dead Chicks channel. So yeah, I've been watching streams and listening to streams all day. So, but let's go ahead. We'll get into this. Let me see if I can get this up here on the screen, and we'll go ahead and get into these death scenes, 1980 through 1989. If you guys have anything to add in the chat, if you guys want to make a case for something, if you if you disagree with my assessment on things, let me know, and we will. Here we go. We'll make changes if necessary. Okay. So I think I have like 20, 21 death scenes in here. Like I said, Romero only made 4 films. It's crazy to think, but really he only made 4 films in the 80s. And but there was a lot to choose from. I mean, yeah, he made more in the 60s, the 60s and 70s, the first 10 years of his career. But boy, yeah. Well, let me see. Make sure everything's here. All right, I think we're good. Okay. So first up here on the list, like I said, the 4 categories that we're going to be moving these to. Iconic at the top. That's, of course, just an iconic death scene in horror or cinema in general. It's one that that when you think of Romero, when the easiest way I can think of it is if there's an interview or a documentary talking about Romero and Romero's work, this will be a scene that they use, that you see over and over and over again, that transcends just Romero's work, but kind of goes into, the history of horror and cinema itself. So that's what I consider an iconic death scene in a film. A satisfying end is just an ending to a character or a story. Is it a satisfying end for you? Do you see this person's demise and say, that's what I needed to see? That worked. Oddly enjoyable. That's just, really personal preference. Like, oh, this is I dug that scene. That was fun. It was oddly enjoyable. Kind of thing. And then deserved better, like I mentioned earlier. It's just that character deserved better. Either that character deserved a more elaborate death, or a more violent death, or more bloody death, or if you just think that the story deserved better, like, oh, that's the way you're going to kill off that character. Meh, could have done better. So okay, now we got that all set up. Let's move to our first uh nominee. What would you call this? Our first death scene on the night. Um and that's Ed Harris as King Billy in Knightriders from 1980. Or 80, yeah, 80, 81, whatever you want to call it. So really, this is the only death scene in Knightriders, and like I was talking about earlier, I mean, Knightriders is it's one of my favorite Romero films. It's one of my favorite films. Period. It's not a horror film. There's not a whole lot of death scenes in this is like I said, this is the only one. Um, to me, it's one of my favorite endings to any of Romero's films. I think to me, just like in terms of it's pitch perfect, I guess is what you would call it. Like when it's over, when you're watching it, the emotions that movie is like a roller coaster. There's so much going on. There's so many side plots happening, and there's and the way that it wraps up, the way that it ends, I think it ends perfectly. I don't think you could do a better ending for a movie like Knightriders. So basically, the end of the film here. Spoiler alert, by the way, if anybody hasn't seen any of these films. I know there are probably some of you out there who haven't seen Knightriders yet. I highly, highly recommend that you check it out, and please, by all means, um, turn this off and watch Knightriders first before you watch this, because I don't want to spoil it for anybody. So now that I've given a warning and given people a chance to turn this off if you don't want anything spoiled. Um, so at the end of Knightriders, King Billy um, he's lost the crown. He's turned it over to Morgan. Morgan's now the king of the troop, and Billy kind of rides off into the sunset. Um, and in doing so, Billy kind of goes and kind of like rights a lot of his wrongs throughout the film. Like there are moments in the film where Billy's kind of a dick. Um, he doesn't do the right thing. Like for example, at the end of the film, he goes and finds this kid that earlier in the film, the kid had come up to him at one of the shows and asked for his autograph. And I've said this a billion times. Knightriders is very much, if you just replace like the Renaissance part of it and the motorcycles and the jousting, and you replace that with a traveling wrestling territory in the 80s, this would be an amazing look at what territory wrestling was like in back in the 80s, 70s and 80s. So this kid comes up to Billy, asks for his autograph, and Billy refuses to sign it because he said, this is not, I don't do this for the fame. I don't do this for, the adoration of children. I'm doing this because, in Billy's mind, this is the best, this is his way to live life on his own terms. And that's what all these people are trying to do. They're trying to live life on their own terms and do what they want to do and not fall into the rat race of the 24/7, you know, uh, um, get up, go to work, come home, yada yada yada. Which a lot of people fall into that, and that's normal. That's just a normal part of life. But of course, when you're younger, you feel like you can pave your own way, and you can kind of create the life that you want to live on a day to day basis. And so Billy's fighting for that. And over the course of time, he kind of comes just to a sort of peace with the fact that um, things change, times change, nothing ever just stays the same. Um, I'm very kind of paraphrasing all that and trying to sum up the film in one 5-minute segment here, but so basically at the end of the film, he kind of goes around and rights a lot of the wrongs. He finds the kid, kind of he gives them he gives the kid his sword that he used, and kind of just showing that my bad, kid. I didn't mean to be a dick. Here's this. You look up to me. Instead of an autograph, I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you my sword. I'm going to give you King Billy's sword. He tracks down the cop at a fast food joint, the cop that is trying to get money out of them at the beginning of the film, and ends up beating the shit out of his friend in the jail cell in front of him. He tracks down the cop at a fast food restaurant and beats the shit out of him all over the fast food all over the restaurant, to the point where he like sticks his head under this ice cream machine and just like runs ice cream down his head. It's an interesting finish of the fight scene, or whatever you want to call it there. But so yeah, Billy's kind of going around righting all the wrongs, and at the same time he's injured, he's bleeding, he's he's starting to succumb to that wound, that injury over the span. I guess it takes place over a couple days or something, where he's doing all of this, because you see him riding through rain, he's riding at day, he's riding at night. He's just he sailed off into the sunset, and in doing so, a moment at the end of the film, there was this bliss or relief starts to just kind of wave over him, of just like he lets everything go, and he's for a second there, he's finally at peace. A very troubled character throughout the film is finally at peace, as he's riding down this highway, and all of a sudden, bam, gets laid out by a semi truck and killed. And then of course the film ends at his funeral with all the the all the troop there, um, saying goodbye to King Billy, and that's how the film ends. And then of course, I mean, it kind of ends up on an up note where they're back on the road, and then the show must go on type of feel. But just in terms of a strictly like a climactic death for a film that has taken you on this roller coaster of emotions, you just like before this happens, you just finished, you know, tearing up, and for me personally, tearing up and shedding a few tears watching, Morgan, Tom Savini's character, break down and cry and take over and become the king, his ultimate goal. And then all of a sudden, you're seeing, Ed Harris redeeming himself for all of these, bad deeds that he had done. Or not bad deeds. It wasn't like he was being, deceitful or something, but, just kind of being a dick. And then just to get laid out, like just out of nowhere. I mean, you're just had this moment of peace where everything else drops out, the sound wise, in the film, and all you hear is the motorcycle, the hum of the motorcycle, before you just "Meh, meh," and then he's gone. And you see his helmet and stuff rolling around on the road. I think it's perfect. I think it's beautifully done. I think it's the perfect ending to that character and the perfect ending to that film. There's very little about Knightriders that I dislike or would change, and this is definitely not one of those things. I think it was beautifully done. So this is going to be a different kind of take here on this count, because everything else, I mean, it's about to get messy. But this one, like, part of me wants to put it in the iconic category, just my personal feelings on it. But Knightriders to me is not. It's a cult film. Like when we were ranking the films, I couldn't rank it as a cinematic masterpiece, even though I would probably personally, just from a Romero aspect, I would probably put it in that category. But it's more of a cult classic, a more of a cult film, so it doesn't get talked about too much. So I don't know if I could put it in iconic, but I mean, I think I think the best place that you could put this one is satisfying end. I mean, it's 100% satisfying. Um, Not iconic, but absolutely a very satisfying end to the film, a satisfying end to Ed Harris's character King Billy. I just love it. I think it's so well done, and the way that it's shot, and apparently Ed Harris really struggled in that performance to kind of hit that exact note that he wanted to hit, when that wave of content, or not content, but what I'm trying to say, that wave of you know acceptance or whatever kind of flows over him. Apparently he really struggled trying to hit that perfectly, but I think he did. So So, all right, we got one on the board. Let's move on to 1982's Creep Show. Now, we got quite a few here on this one. The next two, especially Creep Show and Day of the Dead. I mean, this is pretty much going to be an entire episode based on Creep Show and Day of the Dead at this point. So that's why I spent a little extra time talking about Knightriders and Ed Harris's demise at the end of Knightriders. But the first kill we get in Creep Show is John Lormer, which is a name I was not familiar with. I had to look that up. I was like, who's the old guy that plays Nathan Grantham and in Father's Day and the Father's Day story of Creep Show, because we all know John Amplas plays the Nathan Grantham uh, zombie or whatever. We know that he's under all that makeup and stuff. So when you see John Amplas at a convention or something, that's typically one of the his biggest selling. I'd say that and Martin are probably his two biggest selling 8x10s. Um, but the guy that actually plays the live version of Nathan Grantham is called his name is John Lormer. The scene is to me the scene is sort of iconic, just where he's sitting there and he's banging his cane on the chair, and he's like, "I want my cake, Bedelia, you bitch." I think it's awesome. I love that. It's so over the top. It's perfect for what Creep Show is supposed to be in terms of just being a comic book movie. But of course, he meets his demise when he gets laid out with the ashtray, the infamous ashtray that pops up in every story in Creep Show. See if you can spot it. Um, but he gets laid out with the ashtray um, by Vivica Lindfor's character. What's her name? Aunt Bedelia. That's who it is. Aunt Bedelia. Bedelia. That's right. So Bedelia lays him out with the ashtray. You don't really you see it the swing. You see him take the fall on the ground. Um, Fairly simple. Nothing really crazy. You had Savini. Do you really want to spend part of your effects budget on exploding that old man's head or whatever? I guess you could hit him with the ashtray. I don't know. There really isn't too much of an effect you could do there. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Satisfying end, maybe. I would definitely wouldn't put it in iconic. Satisfying end for that because he's such an annoying old fuck at the beginning of that. Where he's just berating this poor woman as she's trying to make his Father's Day cake, and you kind of feel bad for her. He comes back and apparently he finally gets his cake or whatever. So it's you know, but you feel bad for the lady. She's just trying to make his damn cake, and he's sitting there yelling at her the whole time. I'd probably do the same thing. I'd probably grab that ashtray sooner, honestly. Um. Anyway, I'm a oddly enjoyable. That may be a good deserve better. Nah, I mean, what are you gonna do? I mean, you have to make it somewhat plausible. She wasn't gonna, chop his head off or something. So I think oddly enjoyable because he's annoying. He's just berating this poor woman, and finally he gets his type of thing. So I think oddly enjoyable is where we would put that one for old Nathan Grantham. But then he comes back from the dead and gets his revenge on old Aunt Bedelia. Um, he rises from the grave and kind of just chokes her out, like kind of just strangles her to death. So that was an interesting choice of because the rest of these people kind of get it in some pretty interesting ways. Um, but he just kind of comes out of the grave, scares her to death almost, strangles her. And then that's about it for Vivica Lindforce. Now, of course, this is a conversation that I've had before, and just kind of a thought that I've had before. And I wonder because Creepshow has a lot of bigger name especially for Romero at this time. This is the first time he was really working with big time Hollywood actors. Is there and I've often wondered, is there some kind of like extra clause in a contract you'd have to put in there? Would you have to pay the extras more or the actors more to do an elaborate effect on them to kill them off? Um, Probably so. We'll talk about a couple here in just a little bit. Vivica Lindfors, I don't really know what all you could have done there. I guess just strangling's fine. But I think since she was the one that actually killed him to begin with, and 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 he came back from the dead because of that she killed him and didn't give him his Father's Day cake, you would think that maybe she would have gotten more. So I'm thinking deserve better on this one. Because it's kind of forget like I really couldn't even remember like off the top of my head, it's like how does she die? Like how does he kill her in that movie? And it is a very forgettable death in Creepshow. There's a lot of very memorable ones, but this one's uh one of the more forgettable ones. So I think I would have to put this one in deserve better. I would have liked to have seen something a little more elaborate, maybe a little more kind of full circle for the story, perhaps. But instead she just kind of lays there and takes it. So yeah, it is what it is. And then after Aunt Bedelia gets hers, then of course we see Ed Harris, uh, which is funny. Both roles that Ed Harris had in Romero films, he ends up getting killed in. So that's an interesting little factoid. Um, so Ed Harris plays the character Hank. Hank Blaine is the name on IMDb. I looked all these up just to be sure. Hank Blaine. I don't remember hearing Hank Blaine. I don't even remember hearing Hank in the film. I've seen that film quite a few times, but we'll go with it. Ed Harris is Hank in Father's Day. Of course, he goes out in the cemetery looking for Aunt Bedelia. Um, it's dark. He ends up tripping, falling down. Aunt Bedelia's laying there next to him. He sees, the Nathan Grantham zombie, or if you want to call it that. And then and as this is going on, he's laying under a headstone, which is slowly starting to fall over, and eventually does fall over and crushes Skull. So that's how Ed Harris goes out in this one. He gets run over by a truck and then crushed to death by a headstone. This one's kind of fun just because of Ed Harris's performance in it. You think of Ed Harris and you think of all of the roles that he's had over the years. I mean, starting with Knightriders, and then over the years just going through you know uh, tons and tons of roles. History of Violence. What was he in? Truman Show, Apollo 13. I mean, the dude's been in like everything, and it's one of those things where it's like he's been in so much that you kind of it's hard to pick. It's hard to pinpoint like what are his like biggest roles were. But I mean, he's just been a guy that's been actively employed in Hollywood in a lot of supporting roles for what almost 40 years now. It's insane. No, more than 40 years now. Yeah, more than 40 years now. Um, but just his performance there when the tombstone, the headstone's falling over, and he's just like, just that weird noise. I mean, there's a lot of weird Ed Harris mannerisms in Creepshow. Everybody knows and everybody loves the dance scene with with Ed Harris at the beginning of this. I mean, that's just become like pop culture at this point. I've seen so many memes and people adding different music and stuff to that scene, and I've seen especially about a year or so ago. I mean, it was fucking everywhere. Um, but yeah, this one, I mean, yeah, I probably oddly enjoyable. Did he deserve better? I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's a pretty good way to go, and it was a character that we really didn't have too much invested in, to be honest with you. I mean, that's the thing about anthology pictures is you don't really have a lot of time to get invested in characters. So when you do, I think that says a lot about that story and the film itself. Um, Satisfying, I wouldn't say so. Oddly enjoyable. Something like I said, just Ed Harris's performance in it. That weird little thing that he does before it falls. Love it. All right. So coming up next, Carrie Nye as Sylvia Grantham. She probably has the most, and I think this one, it's got to go in the iconic spot up here. Because I mean, this is one that they've made toy. This death scene they've made toys out of, um, t-shirts, poster. I mean, everything. I mean, this is one of the more iconic images from Creepshow, and it's of course when she runs into Nathan Grantham um, in the kitchen. He grabs her head and twists it all the way around, and then of course Warner Shook I can't remember the other actress's name, but they go into the kitchen looking for her, and he pops out with the tray, and he's got her head decorated like a Father's Day cake, and he finally got, his Father's Day cake. And the effect is simple. I mean, Savini has spoiled the or spilled the beans on that, where they literally just had her, they had the tray and a hole for her head, and she popped her head through. They made it up, and then they put like a black sheet underneath, and to where it just looks like her severed head. That's why it looks so good. Um, yeah, I think this is an easy one to put in the iconic category because, like I said, um, it is just that image alone is one of the more iconic images um, from Creepshow in horror and of George's film career. Simple effect, but very effective. Um, and just the reactions from Watershook and the other fuck, what's her name? I can't think of it off the top of my head. Um, but the other actress in that, when the background lights up different colors, and just such so well done. Creepshow. I mean, they've been so many quote unquote comic book movies over the years, but very few felt like a comic book quite like Creepshow. Sin City is one that I think Robert Rodriguez's Sin City. That's one that when you watch, it feels like you're watching a live action comic book or graphic novel, I guess is the appropriate term. I've had friends that were big into comics and stuff, and I've had some that'll get pissed that if you refer to their graphic novel as a comic book, they're just like, it's not a comic book, it's a graphic novel. Okay, whatever you say, man. Oh, sorry about that. Trying to reach in and grab another drink here. All right. So yeah, that's easily an iconic scene. Let's see. Hey, what's up, Dirk? I was checking your stream out earlier, man. I was talking about it earlier. Let's see. Subjective Perspective Collective says 300. So yeah, 300. Zack Snyder's 300. That's another one. That's feels very much like a comic book in the way that it was done. Not a fan of that film though, really, but the look was definitely very comic book inspired. And I think that was a graphic novel too, wasn't it? All right. Let's see. What do we got next? Up next, Stephen King as Jordy Verrill. Um, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill. So of course in the film he gets the meteor shit on his fingers, and then he begins to be, inhabited by this green weeds or, growth, and it's taken over everything. It's taken over his body, it's taken over his home, it's taken over, the landscape outdoors. I mean, it's everywhere. It's there's nothing you can do with it now. And it gets to the point where, of course, he's covered head to toe, and he just looks like one giant, bush or something. And he says, "To hell with it," and he grabs a shotgun, blows his own brains out. And yeah, that's pretty much the lonesome. That's the story of Jordy Verrill. I love this. Uh, I love this section of the film, the lonesome death of Jordy Verrill. I love the story that story. The performance from Stephen King. I mean, I think Stephen King hates it. I think Stephen King always kind of I always kind of used to give George shit because George wanted him to play it that over the top and wanted him to, mightier shit. He wanted him to play it that, cartoony. And I think Stephen King looks back on it now and he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have. I should have toned it down just a little bit." But I love it. I think it's really really fun, and it's when I first saw the first time I watched Creep Show, this was the one that I remembered. Like after like I was you could quote immediately, meteor shit. Um so the shotgun blast, and I think if I remember correctly, I've heard Tom Savini talk about how that effect really didn't come off quite as he hoped. And when you watch it, it is a little disappointing in a way. When the blast goes off, you see a lot of sparks and stuff. There's no real blood or anything. It's just like it looks like they set off an M80 inside of a bush, and that's kind of what you got. Um, but if I remember correctly, I think Tom said that they had a lot of issues trying to get that effect to work, and Stephen King, according to Tom, Stephen wasn't the most cooperative and didn't like being in that makeup. And there were other things that Tom wanted to do with the makeup on that character that Stephen King wasn't comfortable with and wouldn't do. In terms of, especially I think contact lenses. Something about contact lens. I think Tom wanted to put like green contact lenses in, and Stephen King couldn't do it. So I mean, I'd probably put this one in deserve better. Um, I just don't like the way that shotgun blast looked. It looked a little too dry. You want a little blood or some green blood or something, a little splatter, Um, so yeah, I think Jordy's got to go and deserve better. I think he deserved better. And in terms of the story, I mean, it just kind of ends with him blowing his own brains out. It would have kind of been better if he just kind of grew into the house and grew into, you know, the growth all over, like all around the house, because it goes on, it continues to grow, and it's going to take over the world eventually. I think that's what they kind of insinuate. If he just kind of grew into the ground, you just said, the final shot of the scene is just him like laying there, especially like once he jumped into the tub and it just kind of grew. If he just kind of grew into the tub and you just saw his eyes looking around, I don't know. I feel like there was something you could have done better, a better way to end that than what they did. Um, so yeah, I think Stephen King definitely deserved better than that. Then after that, we move on to our third story in Creep Show, Something to Tide You Over, and Ted Danson as Harry Wentworth. And this is one. I love the shot when he gets when the water engulfs me. He's got his head in a tank, I think, and they shoot it that way. And they actually put his head in a tank, filled it with water, and had him perform with his head. That's amazing. You'd never get an actor to do that today, I don't think. This was like a hardcore, method actor. No friggin' way. But I think they had like hammers or something on standby if they had to break the glass and let all the water free to save his life or something like that. Um, so the effect of me is pretty cool. The fact that Ted Danson did this, and I know Ted Danson is not the biggest fan of his work in Creepshow. I mean, I've heard stories from people where if it's brought up in an interview or something like that, he just kind of laughs it off and he's like, yeah, he doesn't really have a lot to say about it or anything like that. Um, and then maybe that's why. Maybe he just has horrible memories of being stuck under fucking water trying to get the shot, and then eventually, getting covered in, the Savini's makeup. Um, maybe it was he just had horrible memories of it. Maybe it was a traumatic experience for Ted Danson. Who knows? Um, then there's also the story of him and Galen Ross just cracking each other up, doing takes in like bad Southern accents. I've heard that story before too. But the death itself, I mean, it builds up to it. It's, of course, Richard Vickers, played by Leslie Nielsen, kidnaps Harry's girlfriend, who is, Leslie Nielsen's character's wife, ex-wife. I guess they're in the process going through a divorce. and they got them buried, up to their necks out on the beach, waiting for the tide to roll in and kill them. So, interesting concept, an interesting way to kill somebody off. Um, and especially, no evidence, there's, nothing, Um, so the way that it's done is good. Of course, it builds up the water. It gets more and more intense. Like at first, it kind of touches them. It's like, oh, that cold, salty water kind of hits you, and you start to panic, but don't panic. And Leslie Nielsen's character kind of gives him this whole speech about, you got to hold your breath. You got to don't panic and just focus on holding your breath. See how long you can hold your breath. And blah blah blah. So the way that it's built up to and the way that it's done is really well crafted. Um, and of course, he has to sit there and watch, the girl that he loves suffer the same fate right in front of him until the TV goes out. And then we get that amazing shot of him in the tank there where he's trying to hold his breath. Um, so I think it's really, really well done. Satisfying end. Is it his end? Because he does come back. So that's interesting. Would we put it there? Oddly enjoyable. That may be a good spot for it just because of that one shot. But I mean, the way that it's built up, it's not just the shot. Like the shot itself is really cool, really well done. And kudos to Ted Danson for actually doing it and allowing it to happen, I guess. But like I said, the build to it, the dialogue between him and Leslie Nielsen, I really like it. I think I'll put it in satisfying end because I think it is. I think satisfying. I don't know though. This one's tough. Shit, I'm stuck. I'm stuck on one already. This one's kind of tough. Would I put it? Would I? I'll look at it this way. Would I put it next to Ed Harris's death in Knightriders, or Ed Harris's death in Creepshow? I would almost put it somewhere in the fucking middle because it's better than these two, but I wouldn't put it on the same level as that. But like I said, I think the interplay between him, Leslie Nielsen, so well done. The way that it's built up to it's such a diabolical plot, diabolical scheme, a diabolical way to kill somebody. So yeah, I'll put it in satisfying end. I think that's a fairly good spot for it. All right, let's see. So up next, we mentioned Leslie Nielsen as Richard Vickers in this. He finally gets his at the end of this story when Ted Danson and Galen Ross come back from the dead, and they do the same to him. They take him out to the beach, bury him up to his neck, and wait for the tide to roll in. This one I think could be satisfying end as well. Just Leslie Nielsen's performance when he's being stalked in his house. I love his shriek, his scream, the way he reacts. Then, of course, at the end when he's buried up to his neck and he's doing the I can hold my breath for a long time. He's lost his mind. Before he finally gives in and they get a hold of him, he just kind of breaks down into laughter, this maniacal laughter. I think it's really, really well done, but I think I'd put it in oddly enjoyable just because of the performance. But it is satisfying too. I mean, that's the kind of the way you'd want him to go out, especially, I think this will put it over the top, especially at the end when he gets hit with that first wave and he kind of is like, oh shit, it dawns on him. He's like, oh, he snaps back into it and he realizes he's fucked. So I think that's got to be a satisfying end as well. A satisfying comeuppance for a character like Richard Vickers, who was on my list of the top 10 Romero villains too. So I think that makes sense. So then we're moving on to the next story of Creepshow, The Crate. And the first guy to get it in The Crate is an actor named Don Keffer, and he plays Mike the janitor. This one's always been a fun one because it's the first time we see Fluffy. Fluffy pops out of the box and you see him. He kind of... that was... That was a bad Fluffy impression. Urgh, urgh. Holy smokes, folks. Um, but yeah, so Fluffy grabs him, drags him into the box, and assuming eats him, you know, completely devours him. I love this the shot where he's laying there with his arm up, where it's Fluffy's got a hold of his arm in the crate, and the blood's coming down the arm, and covering his shirt, and then it drags him up, and his feet, kind of dangle and get pulled into the crate. Very, very well done. This is what I think I'd put an oddly enjoyable. Excuse me. It's not a satisfying end. Not iconic. I think this is a good one for oddly enjoyable. Because it does suck. We do like that character. Mike the janitor's a pretty nice guy for the most part. He's just trying to, you know, get his quarterback, damn it, for the soda machine. And he gets roped into this nonsense. Poor guy. But I mean, he just got his fault if he just minded his own business. But anyway, so yeah, I'd say it is somewhat oddly enjoyable. Just the way that it goes down, the way that it happens. Um, I think it's a good spot for it. Oddly enjoyable. And then we get Robert Harper as Charlie Garrison, and this one, see, between the two Fluffy attacks between him and Adrian Barbeau, and I guess we can just go ahead and discuss both of these because Adrian Barbeau's Fluffy attack, I think, is different on some level than Charlie Garrison's, because Charlie Garrison's not a character we're really that attached to or really that invested in. It's kind of a name that kind of got mentioned earlier in the film, and then we see him, and then he kind of gets the shit end of the stick here. Um, but his death is far more of an effects driven death. We see, the claw marks down the face, the bite on the neck. I think that's so I think just looking at the categories, I think the best way to do these two, because then we get Adrian Barbeau, who gets who of course, if everybody's seen Creepshow, of course, is just call me Billy, just the most annoying bitchy character in the entire film and any story in the film. And then Hal Holbrook's character lures her down there and kind of for all intents and purposes feeds her to Fluffy to kind of get rid of her and solve a lot of his problems. And the whole story kind of builds and is leading up to that moment, and we get some great scares and some great kills on the way. And I think this is the best. So I think Charlie Garrison's death, oddly enjoyable, because it is a very fun death to watch, just because of the effects work from Tom Savini and just the way that it plays out. And then Adrian Barbeau's death has got to be a satisfying end, because that is a brilliantly laid out story arc there, where Hal Holbrook's character discovers this monster, and then immediately is just like, this would be a good way to get rid of my wife. Then of course we think it might not happen, like, oh, the monster may not be there anymore, and there's that big scare where he pops out after she's berating poor Hal Holbrook, and he's like, you're no good and bad neither. Great stuff. So yeah, Adrian Barbeau, satisfying end. Fluffy doing the job at the end. Oddly enjoyable is Charlie Garrison, because we don't really care too much about that character. We're not too invested in that character. But it is a fun scene to watch just for the effects. And then the final death scene in Creepshow is, of course, the great E.G. Marshall as Upson Pratt. And the story's called They're Creeping Up on You. They do end up creeping up on him at the end here. This one, when I first saw this film, when I first saw Creepshow, This is probably my favorite story of any of them. It's changed probably over the years. I think Something to Tide You Over is now probably my favorite story, just because I love Leslie Nielsen's. I love Leslie Nielsen for one, but I love his performance in that, and just the concept of it. The editing, that was the one that was edited by George Romero, and I love Romero as the editor of his films. But when I first saw it, this one was the coolest one, just because of all the cockroach. You just don't see it. It makes you squirm. It's just I you don't ugh cockroaches. You don't. They're not. It's not something that you really want to even touch or be around in real life. If you're For most people, I mean, some people, I guess, they don't really care about roaches. I've known some people over the years that are not bothered by cockroaches whatsoever. But I think for most people, you don't really want to have too much interaction with cockroaches. And in this one, this poor guy, Upson Pratt, one of the worst villainous characters in any of Romero's films, gets his by literally being overtaken by cockroaches. Lights come on, cockroaches burrow themselves inside the body cavity of E.G. Marshall, the Upson Pratt character, before exploding out of him, literally. Um, this is amazing. This is an amazing death scene. The When the roaches start coming out of the throat and out of the mouth, and all of a sudden they're just. I mean, it was just when people see that. Any people that I've shown Creepshow to for the first time, and when it comes to that part, when the roaches start coming out of, when they just start pouring out of him, it's it's a real like moment. So well done. Just the fact that Romero was able to write that down, or Stephen King, I guess, was able to write that down, and Tom Savini was able to pull it off as well as he did, I think is just a masterful job by Tom Savini. And again, it comes back because E.G. Marshall was a fairly well known actor at the time, fairly seasoned actor, and of course they did, like, the dummy, not dummy, but it was a special effect to have the roaches and stuff pouring out of his neck and out of his mouth and stuff. He wasn't actually laying there, um, you know, with roaches crawling out of his mouth. I wonder if he had to do what Tom had to do to get that. I guess they'd have to cast his head and do a mold and everything. I'm sure. I'd be curious to know if he got paid extra just to do that. Just so they would be able to pull it off. And of course, this was a story that almost just didn't make the cut. If I remember correctly, I think originally it was just going to be those four, and the film would end with the crate. But they decided to add it in last minute, I guess. I forget how that went. I think I can't remember if they decided that. I would guess they wouldn't have just left it off, shot it, and then wasted all that money and not used it. So it may have been in the script process where they were thinking like, maybe we should just do four, but somehow they came around on the fifth story, and I think they did a. It's a really good climax to the film because it's so over the top and so crazy. I think I think it's an iconic death. I think again, it's one of those that anytime you see an interview or watch a documentary or anything where they're talking about Creepshow, usually that's the scene that they use from They're Creeping Up on You. So I think it's a fairly iconic death. Um, let's see. Let me check the chat here real quick. Fairly quiet night again. Understandable, like I said. Um, Frank Miller. Yeah, Frank Miller was 300 and Sin City. So yeah. Let's see. TCCK Gaming. Hello, this is TCCK Films on an alternate account. Sorry, I have not gotten around to posting my Dawn of the Dead inspired short film. Plan to post it soon. Well, hey, I look forward to it, man. I remember you talking about that. But yeah, I definitely look forward to checking it out. Is it a short film? Is it a feature? Um, yeah, look, post it up. Let me know, man. I'll definitely check it out, and I'll give you a shout out on the channel here. I'll have direct everyone to check it out. But good to see you in here, man. Let's Let's see. All right, so now we're moving on to, like I said last week, probably, in my opinion, Tom Savini's best work. Um, a lot of people think Romero's best film. Romero says it's his favorite of his zombie films. And it's become a lot of people's favorite of his films over the years. Day of the Dead, 1985. And we're starting out here with a familiar face, if you recognize a young Greg Nicotero there as Private Johnson. Of course, Nicotero in the film, Private Johnson, ends up getting it pretty. It was an okay way to go. He just got shot. Where would I categorize this as? Deserve better, probably. I think this would be an easy one. It would have been cool to see Greg Nicotero, bitten or torn to pieces, but it's one of those just not very memorable. It's just it kind of happens in the course of like a bunch of other things happening in that scene. Guy we'll talk about in a second, Private Miller, Philip Kellums gets bit, shoots, his rifle goes off, he ends up shooting Greg Nicotero, and he just. But the thing about the I guess I could take this into account, is that it's Nicotero's head that we see severed laying on the table in Logan's laboratory later in the film too, and that's an awesome effect. Just the sever. It's one of the best, to me, one of the best looking practical severed head effects in any film. I think it looks amazing. So that's one thing to take into account. But in terms of his actual death, I think probably deserved better. It's just kind of a throwaway thing to kind of get rid of a character, it felt like. But the severed head gig was pretty good. But then, as I mentioned a second ago, Philip Kellums as Private Miller. The bite, the zombie bite on the throat is, I mean, Tom at this point was hitting on all cylinders. I mean, he had it all figured. I mean, this was, like I said, this is his best work. This is peak Tom Savini, in my opinion. And still to this day, I don't know if I've ever seen better zombie bites in a film. They pretty much, of course, a lot of it's K&B now. So they were there for this, so that's where they learned it from, probably. But still, for some reason, there's just nothing looks quite as good as the bites in Day of the Dead. I don't know why. There's just something gross. I don't know. I don't know if it's a textural thing or what for me, but effects in general, I just don't think that there's many films out there that can compete with Day of the Dead. But Private Miller gets bitten. Of course, not only does he get bitten, as he's holding his throat and begging Steele to, just shoot me, I don't want to be one of those things type of deals. The gunshot from Steele looks amazing too, although it happens kind of in the shadows. So when you first, especially on like the older generation stuff like VHS and some of the earlier DVDs, it's so dark that when he shoots, you just see, oh, headphones fell off. You see, you just see his head go back, and then all of a sudden he falls into frame with the blood from the gunshot. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty damn good death scene all in all. I think I'd probably put it in oddly enjoyable. Yeah, I think that's a fair spot for it. It's very enjoyable just to watch the effects, just to watch the bite. The gunshot, I think, is really well done. So I mean, it's just a well done death, well done effect. And unfortunately, I don't think it's a very effective emotionally, because we don't really know or care too much about this character. Again, him and Greg Nicotero's characters are kind of in the background. Like, of course, you got like the main soldiers like Still and Rickles and Torres, but then you had like the background soldiers who were just kind of there to, I don't know, fill space, I guess. So yeah, oddly enjoyable. I think that's a fair spot for that one. Then after that, I have Richard Liberty as Dr. Logan. And of course, so here's the $1 million question about Dr. Logan's death. Does he come back? Because he wasn't He wasn't bitten, but then again, it's just the dead come back to life. Was he was shot in the head? That's always been a question. But this photo here that I'm using looks like a photo that was from something that wasn't used in the film, or if it was posed for, perhaps. But it doesn't look like he was shot in the head. So you would think that Dr. Logan would eventually rise from the dead, right? I don't know. That's always been a question for me and nerds like me, I guess. Not a question in that the rank and file public's probably debating, but whatever. But of course he gets caught um beating Bub, human remains, and Captain Rhodes, you must listen, Captain. You must listen. Listen to this. Fills him full of lead, just deader than a doornail. I think it looks good. Yeah, the bullet wounds look cool. The bullet wounds look very, very good. And then, of course, the shot from behind is I want to say it's Savini in Logan's costume when he does like the big back bump there. But there's always a question: does the Dr. Logan character deserve better? Probably, but at this point in the film, I think that Joe Pilato, Captain Rhodes, and Steele and the military guys have just had enough, and they're just gunning people down. Which will, we're gonna point one out again here in a minute. And it just kind of comes, for a character like Logan, it comes out of left field a little bit. So it is kind of shocking. It's a little jarring. A lot of the deaths coming up here are a little jarring for an audience at home. So yeah, I don't know. Where would you put this? Satisfying end, oddly enjoyable, deserve better. I think I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think I'm gonna put this in deserve better. Um, Now I'll put that in deserve better, and I think it would be satisfying if we saw him rise, if we saw him come back from the dead, and kind of him and Bub pair up or something. I don't know, something fanboy fiction there, but yeah, I don't know, man. It's not enjoyable because it's kind of jarring and yeah, I think deserve better. Probably a good spot for it. All right, Miguel Salazar, as played by Nick Cannon in the remake. Because when I think of Miguel from Day of the Dead, originally played by Anthony DeLeo, I immediately think of Nick Cannon. But be that as it may, his death in Day of the Dead is one of my favorites. We were talking about the zombie bites and Savini's work perfecting the zombie bite in Day of the Dead. Two of the absolute best zombie bites on Anthony DeLeo. The first one when he gets his arm bit, and of course the whole scene where they cut his arm off and shit. But when he goes up top and he leads the zombies down into the underground bunker, the bite, it looks like they bite right on his nipple and just like it. Oh no, it looks painful. Really good effects work, really good stuff. And just his character alone, he finally loses it and says, fuck it, I'm going out, you're all coming with me. Which is kind of fucked up on his part because even his, I guess, estranged girlfriend or whatever, Sarah at the time, tries to save him. He just kind of becomes homicidal and wants to take everybody out with him. So, but hey, the effects are amazing. It's literally an important moment in the film because that's how the zombies overrun the underground shelter there. So I don't know if I'd put it in iconic, but I do think it is very satisfying because it takes that Miguel character. Literally, he's a character that is in the process of completely losing his mind throughout the film, and then that's what dooms everybody in the end. So I think it's got to be a satisfying end. I think that looks okay. I'm kind of thinking maybe Adrian Barbeau goes up in iconic, but I don't think so. There's not really an effect to that death or anything really. They just Fluffy grabs her, the scream, the look, that's great. But I don't know. We'll talk about it in a minute. But I'll put that in satisfying end. I think that's really, the bites are satisfying. I think it's just perfect. Then of course John Amplas as Dr. Fisher. Um, Held hostage by Rhodes and the boys, and Rhodes just shoots him in the head, executes him um, in an attempt to persuade Flyboy to fly for him. Really out of nowhere, you don't expect it. It's pretty well done. Deserve better? Would you put him? Because it's not really. To me, Dr. Fisher, and as much as I love John Amplas, all right, let's get into this. Because what the fuck? As much as I love John Amplas and Martin, I think it's one of the best performances of any Romero film, any horror film. I'll fucking say it. John Amplas's performance in Martin is one of the best performances in horror film, period. But his performance in Day of the Dead is just very, very forgettable for me. Like, it just doesn't. I feel like, and maybe it's just the character. I feel like the character of Dr. Fisher's just kind of there. Like, he's friendly with Sarah, but that's really about it. Like, there's really, I don't know. I've never been enamored or interested in that character whatsoever, and I don't know why. So when he gets killed, there is something oddly enjoyable about it because of the effect that George is trying to make you feel something. He's starting to make you uneasy because they're literally killing everybody without thinking twice about it at this point. Dr. Logan killed in cold blood. Dr. Fisher killed in cold blood. I mean, they mean business and shit's really going down. So to me, this one's oddly enjoyable. There's something a little more enjoyable about it than Dr. Logan's death. Probably because Dr. Logan's death, Dr. Logan was a little bit more of a more important character in the film. He was, really if not the one of the most important characters in the film. The guy really pushing the story and pushing things forward and pushing Romero's um, Romero's universe forward and showing that these creatures are smart, they're learning, you can teach them, you can train them, you can make them behave, you can do this, and this. And yeah, I feel like he deserved better than just getting, gunned down like that. But Fisher, that one was oddly enjoyable because you don't really expect it the first time you see it, and you don't really care enough to to really debate it. Where you're like, oh, Fisher deserved better. No, I don't know, and that's nothing against John Amplas either. I think John Amplas is a very good actor and a very nice guy. But I'd even take his performance in fucking Knightriders over his performance in Day of the Dead, and he doesn't say a fucking word in Night. He didn't really say a word in Martin hardly either. But Knightriders, he's playing a fucking mime, and I feel like I'd rather watch. Just his body movements and stuff is more captivating and interesting to me than what he's portraying with Dr. Fisher there. And I don't know why. Maybe I'm in the minority here. Maybe people are like, "Oh, Dr. Fisher, that's my guy," I don't fucking know, but just me personally. Um let's see. All right, so we're getting to the heavy hitters here now. I swear to God, every single one of these coming up could be in the iconic category. But let's see. First up, Tasso Stravak. I struggle with that name because I'm a fucking hillbilly from Kentucky. Stavrakis. Tasso Stavrakis. There we go. Tasso Stavrakis as Torres. And of course, in his death, he is overcome by the living dead, by the zombies. and they rip his head straight from his body, and the effect is amazing. The way that they change the pitch of his voice as he's screaming to make it more high pitch is fucking brilliant. Um, you see his feet kicking, so you know it's not a dummy. Like I said, Savini was at the top of his game on this, and it's one of the most amazing effects um, in the film. And so simple. Again, another severed head effect that works so well in this film. Um, Now I'm trying to compare these next four. I'm trying to kind of compare with each other. Because I don't know if there have been any other deaths in Romero's filmography that really compare. Even in even Dawn of the Dead, and in terms of just like over the top splatter, just memorable death scenes. So I think in comparison, this one's got to be oddly enjoyable. I think is the best spot for that one because it's a very enjoyable effect. It's very well done, but at the same time, I wouldn't say it's satisfying because Torres is another one of those characters who kind of buddies up with Rickles and Steele at the end of the film, but throughout the film, you don't really care about Torres. You don't really. There's not a lot there for you to really say, "Oh yeah, they fucking ripped his head off, hooray!" So to me, that one's got to be oddly enjoyable. Now the next one here, Ralph Marrero playing Rickles. Maybe it's just me, but I think this is an iconic death scene. Um, it's the one that I remember specifically watching the film, possibly even more so than the Joe Pilato death because it's so creative. Joe Pilato's death is amazing. It's like literally the climax, the gory climax of the film where they literally rip him in half, drag his legs down the hall, tear out his. I mean, it's fucking it's fantastic. But to me, the Rickles death, the creativity of it, where they literally rip his eyelid up his forehead, and then this is the part that fucking gets me every time. When I see it, I'm like, God, that looks so good. Tom just killed it. And it looks good. Just the effect, the appliance on his face, you can't see through it. But when they rip that eyelid up through his forehead, and you see his whole eye just exposed there. The thing that gets me is when that zombie, like you see the fingers kind of dig into the eye socket and kind of grab on, and it's just like the way that that's done is so effective. Um, Personally, for me, it's iconic, satisfying. Yeah, I'd say it's pretty satisfying. Rickles is one of the most annoying characters in Day of the Dead from start to finish. He's just like this. He's like he's like a fucking hyena or something. He's just like, he's just like the evil henchman sidekick type. I don't know. Anybody got an opinion on that or not? I don't know. I don't know. Let's move on. We'll see where the rest of these, and we'll rank them appropriately here. So after Rickles gets his, we get Steele finally gets his comeuppance. He gets bit in the throat. Shoots a couple of zombies. Once he's bitten, he knows that he's done for. He's bleeding out, and he takes the easy way out. He decides to put the gun in his mouth and blows on brains out, and then he drops to the floor. And again, an effect. The bite is amazing. The gunshot looks amazing. The shot of him after he shoots himself, the shot of him like just sliding down the wall and just sitting there while the zombies, come in to tear him apart. Amazing stuff. Um, is it satisfying? Is it enjoyable? You could make the case that that Steele deserved better. Not in terms of like, oh, he deserved to die peacefully in his sleep, but he deserved to get torn apart just because of he was so abusive and hateful and just angry towards the zombies. Like they were the bane. I mean, obviously the bane of his existence, but he was just disgusted by them, hated them, cussed them out, spit on them. I mean, just everything you would have liked to have seen. Hey, you'd have probably liked to have seen maybe Bub take him out or something, which Bub finally gets his here in a second. But I would kind of say, Steele kind of took the easy way out. It would have been cool to see Steele get the same treatment that Torres and Rickles got, but I guess there's only so much you can do. But like I said, the effects are good, and but I don't think, like I said, this one's easily. We're gonna move on to Joe Pilato's death, one of the most iconic deaths in horror film history, and that's not even an over exaggeration. Iconic is, you know, is about as an appropriate term for this as you can get. Anytime that you see anybody talk about Day of the Dead, they show this clip. It's one of the most memorable deaths. It's the most enjoyable. It's everything. It's oddly enjoyable because it's so grand and over the top. It's very satisfying because Rhodes finally gets his in the end in the most satisfying way, to where you're literally just torn in fucking half. And he gets, even the bit of dialogue in it, he gets the last word, choke on him, choke on him. Perfect. I mean, it's the perfect death scene of a villain in it's the perfect death scene for a villain in any film. I think it's just like when you watch like I remember when The Dark Knight came out, and the first time I saw that in theaters, and through that whole experience and the whole ride that you take with Batman trying to capture the Joker, that by the end you want him to kill the Joker. You want him to, like, this guy's got to go. And I remember watching the film, and I love that film. I've seen it, multiple times since then. It's probably one of my favorite films ever, but especially in the last, 20 years or so. But I remember watching, I was just like, oh, because, Batman kind of just, leaves him. And that was the thing too, is like in the theater when he throws the Joker off the side of the building and Joker's falling, presumably to his death, and he stops him. When he throws the Joker, the theater cheers. They're like, yes, finally. I literally, this is what happened in the theater. The theater cheered. And then when Batman saved him, there was an audible like, oh. And that is the exact opposite with Day of the Dead and Captain Rhodes. Captain Rhodes gets his, you cheer and you cheer and you cheer, and then you laugh a little bit when he says choke on him, and then you cheer again when Bub gives him the fucking salute. It's the perfect fucking death scene. And it's going to be hard to beat in terms of like greatest death scenes in Romero film history. It's hard to beat Captain Rhodes. But that brings us back to the other two of Rickles and Steele here. I think after thinking on it for a second, I think Rickles has got to be satisfying because, yeah. Well, Steele, I think I'll put in deserve better. Not because I think that the effect didn't work or anything like that. I just think that character deserved the Captain Rhodes treatment. But man, the Rickles, I love that effect so much. The fucking eyelid, and the fingers going in the eyes, and the fact that he's laughing as it's going on, and then as he's laughing, then all of a sudden the shit starts getting real, and they start pulling and tearing at him, and his laughs turn from, laughter to screams of pain and agony. Fuck it, it's iconic. I don't care. Rickles' death is iconic to me. Anybody, if you want to debate me on that, I'm more than willing to have that debate. So we got a new name in the chat here, Rick the North going llama. Hiya, gang. What's going on, Rick? Good to have you in here, man. Let's see. So yeah, I think that looks right. I mean, Captain Rhodes' death. I mean, you can put Rhodes at the top of the list here. I mean, he's if it worked, there you go, front and center. Probably the most iconic death in any Romero film ever. But I think Rickles has got to go there too. Um, just for the simple fact that the effect is so damn good and so effective still to this day. And I don't know, am I going too crazy on that one? It's amazing to me, like when I do countdowns or when I do rankings or anything like that, Day of the Dead always seems to come out on top. Performances, I mean, Howard Sherman as Bub, one of the best performances in any Romero film. Best villains, Captain Rhodes. Best zombie, Bub. I mean, so much about Day of the Dead is so well done and so, you know, I mean, I understand why why it was George's favorite. That's that everything just seemed like everything came together and worked in an environment where it probably shouldn't have, because it was one of those films that was originally meant to be one thing but had to be, changed to something else because George had to compromise on certain things. And but man, it works. It really, really works. Performances, effects, it just works all the way around. But that brings us to the last film of the night, Monkey Shines, 1988. And I really don't have a lot to say about Monkey Shines. Like I mentioned it earlier, we talked about it with just my feeling on the film itself, and I don't have too much to say about two of these. The first one of which is Joyce Van Patten as Dorothy Mann, the mother of Jason Begay's character. Um, she deserved better. Ella the monkey tosses. She's in the bath. Ella tosses the hair dryer into the bathtub and electrocute. Although the cool thing about that scene is every time it blows the lights out and they turn the switch to turn the lights back on, it like goes back and shocks her more, knocks the light. So that was kind of a fun part of her death. But again, it's off screen. You don't really see anything. You don't really see much of a reaction shot or anything. It just kind of happens and the lights blow and not a lot to it. So, and that character, I mean, yeah, she's just being a concerned mother and wanting to help and all that. But at the end of the day, yeah, you may have wanted to see something a little more there than what we got. Um, I don't know. If I'm putting her in deserve better, I think I'm going to move Steel up to oddly enjoyable, because at least Steel's death, yes, he that character deserved worse, but that should be another category. Deserved worse. Deserve better, deserve worse. Character deserved a worse death. This character deserved better. I don't know. But I think oddly enjoyable. I'm gonna move that up to oddly enjoyable because it is an enjoyable scene. It's well acted, well done. I mean, I couldn't put it in the same category as fucking Joyce Van Patten from Monkey Shines. And then of course John Pankow as Jeffrey Fisher from Monkey Shines. He brawls with the monkey, and the monkey shoots him up with this. I've seen that movie multiple times. I still have no idea what the fucking shit is in the syringe that kills him. I guess it was enough to kill like an elephant or something like that. But in the film, it's very well acted. John Pankow kind of laughs, and he's just kind of stumbling around the house, being kind of goofy, and then eventually just collapses into the floor, and just he's there dead throughout the rest of the film. And it's interesting because throughout, as the scene plays out through the end of the film, and I mean the film goes on for another 20 minutes or so, but he's constantly there in the background laying in the floor. I mean, you see that it is John Pankow laying there. So I don't know if they actually used him, or if it was a body double or how they did it, but I mean, throughout the rest of the film, you see him laying there in the floor. So I mean, if he was just like on set every day, just like, all right, well, we got to shoot the rest of this movie, and I'm supposed to be laying on the floor, so now I got to be here laying on the fucking floor. Kudos to him. I mean, that's pretty fucking funny. But the death in itself, I mean, the performance, the way that he did it was fairly enjoyable. But again, it probably deserves something better. Like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of Monkey Shines. I think there's a story there somewhere, but it wasn't a story for George to tell. It wasn't George's story to tell. That's why to me, I mean, that's why we love certain filmmakers like George Romero. That's why we like these people, is because we want to hear their stories. We want to see their perspective. We want to get their opinions. We want to see their vision. And to me, I don't know. Just don't see it with Monkey Shines. That's just me. I know a lot of people love Monkey Shines, but and like I said, it's not a bad movie. It's just not a George movie. But then last but not least on the list, after saying all I've said about Monkey Shines, there is one part of Monkey Shines that I absolutely love, and that is the death of Ella, played by Boo. And yes, Boo does have her own IMDb page. And Monkey Shines is not the only thing that fucking monkey did. The monkey was in something else too. I was just like, what? The monkey had a career. Boo had a career. But I fucking love this scene. This is a really good ending when the monkey's about to kill oh fuck, what's her name? I can't think of her fucking name off the top of my head. But about to kill the female lead, and Jason Begay's character like trying to stop the monkey from doing it. So he miraculously moves his hand over, because he's a quadriplegic, moves his hand over, turns the music on, and it makes Ella want to come up and hug him and dance with him like they did earlier in the film, which it's really well crafted in the way that they did something at the beginning of the film, and then it came all the way back around, and that's what kind of saved the day type of thing. So it really, really well done scene, and really well laid out. And then as the monkey hugs Jason Begay, Jason bites the monkey on the neck, and it's just like biting down. You see blood squirt from the monkey up onto Jason Begay's face. And then one of the best fucking parts of that film, and any of Romero's film, one of my favorite death scenes ever, is he's got the monkey by the neck, and then he just starts whipping the monkey back and forth, and you just see that poor monkey just flopping back and forth, and it seems to go on for like 30 seconds or something, from like 4 or 5 different angles, 4 or 5 different shots. You're just seeing him just swinging this monkey back and forth, killing it. And then he throws it. It hits the fucking the cassette player, lands in the floor dead. I fucking love that. I thought it was just so entertaining the way that this fucking quadriplegic kills this fucking monkey. Is it iconic? No, I think it's borderline almost. It's to me it is, because it's one of the only things that I can remember vividly from the fucking movie. There's a few other things, but for the most part, like, this is absolutely my favorite part of the film. But it's 100% a very satisfying end for Ella, played by the wonderful Boo. Yeah. All right. So there it is. What are you guys thinking? Look good, look bad, disagree? Let me analyze, see if I want to move any of these around. Because like I said, I'm taking the ones from the last episode, all the iconic selections in that. I'm going to put with the iconic selections from this one, and then I'm going to do part 3 coming up. I'm not sure when. But part 3 will be everything from 1990 through, the rest of George's career. Because there's a big hole there in the 90s where George really didn't do much. But I'm going to take all the iconic scenes and kind of boil them down to a nice top 10 list. I don't know if, it may be pretty obvious that Captain Rhodes is probably going to be number one on that list too. But I mean, you never know. Where we're talking, Night of the Living Dead, Marilyn Eastman's death in Night of the Living Dead, getting stabbed to death by her daughter. I mean, that's iconic. Ben's death in Night of the Living Dead is iconic. Multiple things in Dawn of the Dead are very iconic. So I mean, it's gonna be, it'll be fun. It'll be an interesting exercise to kind of whittle that down and put it into a definitive top 10. Um, I don't know, move anything. I mean, I guess if I wanted to order these, I'd probably put Ed Harris, then the Monkey Shine's death, probably that one there. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Looks good. I think it looks good. I think that looks pretty solid there. Pretty solid. So all right. All right. So there we go. That was part 2 of the top Romero death scenes 1980 to 1989. Feel pretty good about that. Feel pretty good about that. It's weird talking about death so much, but I mean, I'm trying to do it in a fun, interesting way to where it's just kind of I don't really want to focus on the death aspect as much as just what it led to, the effect that it had on the film, the characters that that were involved, and all that, etc. But just something fun to do. I don't know. I'm enjoying doing this. I don't know if you guys are digging these tier lists or not, but it's a nice like mental exercise for me in a way. Um, just kind of categorize, and it's giving me an excuse to go back and watch some of these films. Like, no, Monkey Shines. Monkey Shines is one that I don't really go back to a whole lot. Like, I'll probably watch it once every year, once every year and a half or so. I'll have to be in the mood to be like, I'm gonna give Monkey Shines another shot. It's kind of like Two Evil Eyes to me, and The Dark Half. Again, it's just that period in George's career where I feel like George wasn't doing George, and I love when George does George, and I felt like George was just doing everybody else's stuff at the time. Um, that's why I love Bruiser when I saw it, because that Bruiser, you love it or hate it, whatever you think about Bruiser, it is at the end of the day uh, George's film. He wrote it. It's his concept. It's his ideas. Directed. It's George's film. So however you feel about it, it's George's. That's what I love. But yeah, Quiet Night in the chat. I appreciate you guys stopping by. It was good seeing a couple of familiar faces tonight, and a new face here. Rick is popping out. Rick the North Going Llama. That's an interesting name. I'll have to you'll have to come back on here at some point. I have to ask you about that. But take care. Sorry to leave early. Got to join the creature feature scene. Um, but cool. Thanks for stopping by, man. Good to have you in here. TCCK Gaming, Dirk, of course. Check his channel out, Subjective Perspective Collective. Like I said earlier, he was doing a versus stream, New York Ripper versus Pieces, and it kind of made me want to go back and watch New York Ripper again, because it's been a few years since I've seen it. I think I've only seen that film once, and I remember liking it. I have it on fucking Blu-ray over here. The Blue Underground put out a few years back. So I may be sort of inspired to go back and check that out again. But check out his channel. Does a lot of cool stuff with really interesting conversations there. But that'll be it for me tonight. I'll be back, like I said, next weekend, Christmas special. Hopefully, fingers crossed, doing a live fan commentary, drunk commentary, if you will, because there's no way I'm fucking watching this movie in a sane state of mind. John Russo's Santa Claus, the classic Christmas horror film starring Debbie Rochon. Carl Hardman's in it. Marilyn Eastman's in it. There's a lot. There's a lot of Romero connections to it. I mean, it's a horrible piece of shit film. But like I said, it's a Romero adjacent film. There are a lot of connections to Romero, with John Russo. Bob Michelucci, who was, of course, the Scope Zombie in Dawn of the Dead, was one of the producers on the film. Carl Hardman, Marilyn Eastman were in it. So it's just the movie itself's not the best, but it is cool to kind of see Carl Hardman and Marilyn Eastman, doing something else in the '90s. That's fun to see. So yeah, plan on doing that next weekend. And then after that, we'll see what happens. And like I said, part 3 of this series coming up soon. Probably sometime early January, if I were to guess. But appreciate everybody stopping in, checking this out after the fact. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers some fucking way, somehow. I'm not sure. But it's pretty fucking cool that there are so many people responding to. And that's the thing. I say that a lot. That's the thing. But when I started this channel, I wanted to do something for George. I love talking about George. I love Romero. I love his films. I love anything in the Romero world. That's my thing. And when I started a channel, I was like, I don't know if there's a lot of people out there that are really going to be, you know, gung ho about subscribing to a channel about a guy and just talks about George Romero all the time and posts nothing but George Romero stuff. And but man, the response has been insane. I love reading the comments from you guys, reading people's stuff on the videos that I post, and made some good friends doing this channel. And I really it's humbling. I really appreciate it. But it's all for George. I'm not making a dime off this. I don't plan to ever. I mean, there's so many rules and regulations and YouTube regulations and shit that I'd have to do fucking cartwheels around, and I'm just not gonna fucking deal with it. I have a job. I work 9 to 5. I have a 9 to 5 job. Like, it's not life or death for me. I just love doing this. I love talking about George. I love talking about his films, and this gives me a reason, gives me an excuse to do it with like-minded, kick-ass people like yourself. So certainly appreciate it. But yeah, I'll be back next week. Christmas special. And like I said, I have a special video that I'm going to post on Christmas that I think a lot of people are going to be really, really excited to see, because a lot of people probably haven't seen it because it's never been available in the United States until now. But until then, as always, night timers, you guys have a great rest of the night, a great rest of the week. And as a great man always used to say, stay scared. Night, everybody.